have a look.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Tokimaru and I'm here to have a look at Dreamed Away. This is a top-down pixel RPG developed by a solo dev named Nicholas Pettin and published by Pineapple Works, which is a publisher that offers help with various things like polishing and bug fixing for mostly just indie games. Now, this is a game that I'm actually surprised I hadn't heard about earlier. It's been in development for about 3 years, with a Kickstarter that launched in 2024 and was fully funded within the month at about 30k euros with a goal of 20k, sorry. Like I said, I'm surprised I hadn't heard about this earlier because this is a game that has very clear inspirations from games like Undertale and the Mother series, and that type of thing is right up my alley. And you'll see what I mean when I say it has very clear inspiration because it'll be quite obvious once we get into the game. But for now, let's start by jumping into the options menu, shall we? Now, I have a few small problems with this options menu, but all in all, it's overall fairly good. The gameplay, there are no gameplay options. The only gameplay option here is languages, and that's about it. For video options, we have full screen on or off. We have borderless windowed mode on or off. I would prefer if this game had specific resolution options, just for accessibility. And because when you're in windowed mode, you can't change the size of the window. So I would prefer if there were a few resolution options. We have VSync on or off. This is a tiny nitpick. I would prefer if there were specific FPS limit options, but other than that, it's still fairly good. And here's an additional option that I wish was in more games. There's an actual FPS counter that you can see is at the top of my screen here. I decided I'd leave that on so you could see when or if there are FPS drops. I haven't really noticed any issues so far, but I've been playing with unlimited FPS. So mileage may vary with VSync on and as well as depending on the refresh rate of your particular monitor. Screen shake on or off, flashing lights on or off, very good for accessibility purposes. Pixel perfect upscaling on or off, I leave it on, but that's very nice to have. Let's jump into the controls. Here is a problem I have with the controls menu. You cannot rebind your controller layout. As you can see, this is actually very nice, and it's something that I don't see very often in some games. You can see all 3 major companies' controller layouts, and I believe it also has the proper prompts for each controller type. However, like I said, unfortunate that you can't rebind the buttons on your controller because if I exit out for a second and switch to mouse and keyboard, and this game does control with both controller as well as mouse and keyboard, but like I said, when you're using keyboard, it actually lets you rebind your keys, which is annoying because when you're using controller, you can't rebind your controls. So I hope they get that fixed, if at all. But yes, it's very nice that they have all 3 controller prompts in this game. For audio, we have music and sound effects. My only real suggestion is if we had an overall volume slider. But other than that, fairly good. Like I said, this game is a pixel art game, so I don't think you need to expect much in terms of graphics, but the actual video options that they do offer you here are generally pretty good. Now, let's jump into the game. So, like I said, this is a game that takes inspiration from games like Mother and Undertale, and you should be able to see here, just by the art style and overall presentation of the game is extremely reminiscent of the Mother series. Mother 3 in particular. I felt that the art style reminded me a lot of Mother 3, especially with the way some of the character sprites are drawn. It's very Mother 3-esque. If I go into the menu, you'll see this is my menu, and when we go into things like items or equip, this is extremely the same. It's extremely reminiscent of Mother. This is basically how the Mother 3 menus worked, with a few changes. They make a few quality of life changes in this game. Like, I don't think there's an actual inventory limit, so you don't have to like put items away. You only play as one character in this game. You don't really have a party, so you don't have to worry about managing character inventories or anything like that. But like I said, the presentation The presentation of this game feels very similar to Mother. Now, so the gameplay of this game is about a young French boy. You're a boy living in France somewhere named Theo. Your main goal is to search for your lost sister. I don't want to give away too much in terms of the story, but I'll try to explain parts about it that I think are good and parts about it that I think are bad. Now, the overall gameplay of this game is you're going through areas, sort of talking to people, you know, completing quests. Typical RPG fare. Some areas are more linear than others. So there's this one area where you're in sort of a dream sequence, and you have to go through it collecting things, and then you leave the area. Fairly linear. Very early game, you have very specific story beats you have to hit. In certain parts of the game, like where I am now, I'm currently in a sort of like a submarine, not a submarine. I'm in like a science lab at the bottom of the ocean right now. There's another part earlier in the game where you're in a town, and those areas are sort of more exploration based, where you have your mini hub and you're going around to exploring different areas. Things change as you progress through the story in that area. Sometimes you enter sub areas or dungeons, and in those types of areas you have fights with creatures, which you will see in a moment. If I walk around, so much like Mother, you have to, or Undertale, I suppose, you have to find save points in the world. You have to like go to places to find the save points rather than just being able to save it anywhere. So if I go over here, I can show you just random places. I actually started this area, I believe, in this room. So that we started this part of the game, continuing like a shipwreck, and we got saved, and now we're here. We get to explore a few places, we get to talk to people. I feel like a few of the characters are surprisingly not particularly interesting. Oh. This is actually new. So I was going to show you some combat content because I want to show you how the combat in this game works. This is actually new. So before, what happened was, occasionally through this game, there are like these gnomes or elves or something that just kind of show up and do a little bit of comedy, and then they leave. And in this room, they show up, they're like, hey, you should do some tests. And then you go behind this x-ray. I was gonna show this off because it's a very cute little thing you can do where you go behind the x-ray and it shows you your skeleton. This is a surprise. Hello? So here's what I wanted to show you. Oh, this is one of the little gnome guys. Hello, tiny human. But yeah, okay, that's neat. So yeah, like I said, with the sort of, oh, well, that's nice. So with these sort of hub areas, safety class, +2 defense, that sounds awesome. With these little hub areas, you sort of just go around to these little different branching paths. With this, it's more tight. And what I mean by that is it's like 5 hallways, and then in each hallway you have like 3 or 4 doors where you can go into, talk to people, and you go into these little branching areas. There's a main quest you generally have to do, but you can go off, you can do some side quests, you can talk to people, you can inspect objects. There are a lot of different objects you can inspect for dialogue. A problem I have with this is I love inspecting things for dialogue in games like this. I feel like this game doesn't make much use of it, or as good use as I would prefer. For example, for something like Undertale, it feels like every single object has like a little quip or a joke or a snappy one-liner. In this game, a lot of the things that you're inspecting are just describing how they are, and it doesn't really give you, a lot of them don't give you, I think, a good look into Theo's personality. There are some where it feels like Theo is describing them to you in the way that their mind works. But for a lot of them, it's just sort of describing them. Like this one, it's like, oh, it's a yellowish liquid, gross. But like, a lot of them are just like, it's a stretcher, it's a fire extinguisher. There was this one really good bit earlier in the game where there were like 20 plants in a hallway, and if you inspect them all, they're all the same thing except for one of them, which was really good. But other than that, I feel like they don't make that much good use of the inspect dialogue, which is it's a shame, because I feel like that's a really fun way to sort of incentivize exploration and inspecting a whole bunch of different things. But yeah, like I said, you go around, you inspect things, you talk to people in these big hub area type worlds, type levels. I don't know what you would call them. You're usually doing a main story, and after every story beat, things change. So like, people move around. So like, if you go into all these different rooms, depending on how far you are into the story, different people will be in different places. They'll be doing things like, for example, that gnome downstairs. After I did the thing with the gnomes there the first time, they disappeared, so it was just an empty room, and then after I finished the story beat, the gnome came back, which is really cool. I like seeing things change around the world, and I like finding new things even in areas that I've already completely combed over. Like, I've been through this entire place, through every room in this entire place, about 2-ish times, and every time I hit a story beat, they change a little bit. I wish, like I said, I wish there was better inspect dialogue, but overall I think they do a pretty decent job at making you want to see what's changed after every story beat. Now let me try to go to an area where I can fight things, because I want to show you the combat. Now, a criticism that I have about the combat overall, in terms of battles, it feels like the amount of battles in each area is kind of poorly paced. I think that what they're going with this game is the primary intention. Like, the battles aren't the primary draw of this game. I think the main point of this game is the story, and the battles are sort of there to have some sort of pushback against the player, and just something you're trying to get through. But I feel like, and you'll see in a moment, I feel like the battles aren't interesting or complex enough to have the amount that they have, because there are certain areas like dungeons, like I said. I don't know if I would consider this area coming up to be like a dungeon, but I've put on a water suit. I don't know if I would consider this area coming up to be like a dungeon. Oh yes, I have to do this. But like in dungeons, it feels like they're spamming 10 to 20 enemies at you. What I do appreciate in this game, it's not random encounters, it's static encounters. With overworld sprites, so you can see how many enemies you have to fight. But whenever you re-enter a room, it respawns all the enemies. So when you're in like a dungeon area, like what I think is coming up next, it feels like the amount of fights is, it feels like there's too many fights, and they don't give you enough breathing room while you're in the dungeon. So this has a special mechanic where I have to refill my oxygen every like 1 minute. But otherwise, there aren't actually that many combat areas in this game. I think most of this game is exploring and talking to people, and less so the combat. And I want to show you the combat because it is somewhat interesting. But I feel like I'm actually trying to find something. I need to find either an oxygen thing or I need to find fights. But I feel like the way they did the fights in this game, because I think the combat isn't necessarily the main draw of this game. Hello. Because I think the main combat isn't necessarily the main draw of this game, it's not as interesting as I would like. It does do some interesting things. It isn't like unfun. I'm hoping I can find it. But see, I feel like, okay, surely this is something. Normally I would be exploring every nook and cranny in this game, because they do have a lot of like actual secrets. I actually, earlier in the game, even though I've been scouring every single corner of the map for secrets, I did end up discovering that I missed a secret. There are like these hidden fairy fountains that you can find that increase your health. I apparently missed the first one and got a few others. There are some areas where they have secret arcade games for you to play, which are pretty cool. There are some like secret items that you can get. I think a couple of my items I actually have are specifically secret items. Like this femur that I have, I'm pretty sure is a secret item. We have, where is it? Oh yeah, the diploma is a secret item. It's a 20% EXP bonus, which is pretty good. So they do have a lot of really cool things that incentivize exploring. So normally I would be trying to go through every nook and cranny of this game. But like I said, I want to try and find a fight. Okay. So again, very Mother. Just by the way you enter fights, it feels very Mother-esque. And like you'll see in a moment, the actual combat of this game is primarily inspired by Undertale. So this is our fight menu. We can use our basic attack. We can use an ability. We get 2 ability slots in this game. I actually should have gone over this in the menu, but when you're outside of combat, you can assign different abilities to these 2 slots. I found the best way to do it is just to boost your attack as much as possible. So a lot of the abilities in this game have trade-offs like this, where you get plus offense and -4 defense, or this where you lower the enemy's defense, but you also lower your defense. But I found the best way to do it is just to buff your attack as much as possible, and then just don't get hit, because this game is very Undertale inspired in terms of combat. Ah, shoot. But, okay. Oh, perfect. This game is very Undertale inspired in terms of combat, like you saw right there. So usually what it is the enemy has 2 or 3 usually 2 types of attacks with different patterns for each of them. Either they're shooting a bullet hell at you, or they're giving you a QTE minigame. Those are the 2 types of attacks that every enemy in this game has. And that's one of the problems I actually have with the combat in this game, is it feels like there's a little bit of a lack of variety, because every enemy has the same 2 attacks. They're just configured a little bit differently. So a lot of the bullet hell attacks, I'll explain in a moment, they feel very similar, even if they do have their own special unique gimmick to them. And then the QTE attacks, they're just reconfigured in different patterns of pressing the buttons. It's always the arrow keys, by the way. It's always the arrows. They're just reconfigured at different speeds and different shapes and things. And if you miss a QTE, then it shoots you with the bullet hell anyway. So that's also why I find the best way to go through this game is to max out your attack as much as possible. And don't worry about defense, because all you have to do is just not get hit. You just don't get hit, and then you don't have to worry about defense. Okay, so I have to hard focus here. Whoops. But yeah, usually you can also, because they also do the bullet hell, even if you fail the QTE, you can just not get hit there. And ideally, you wouldn't actually be losing health. Unfortunately, it's hard to do now that I'm recording, but for a lot of this game, I actually haven't had that much trouble avoiding attacks or doing the QTEs. For the most part, I feel like you spend like 2 or 3 turns buffing your stats, and then you hit them twice and they die, and then you just dodge everything. I think this game for the most part is it's pretty easy if you're like halfway decent at either the bullet hell or the QTE mechanics. There aren't really any fights where I felt like I was on the back foot, except for a couple specific boss fights. But overall, I think the game is, the battles are pretty easy, and there isn't that much complexity in terms of things like bullet patterns or the complexity of the stats or abilities. Like I said, you have two ability slots, and then you have like 4 stats. I wish I could show you the stats. Maybe if I can run away for a second. Well, like on our stats screen, we just have HP, offense, defense, and then luck. I forget what luck is supposed to do, if it's like crits or something. But that's it. There's only those. In terms of abilities, we have 2 slots. We have a few things. We have focus attack. We focus defense. It boosts your defense, lowers your attack. This slows down the enemy's bullets and QTE patterns, but increases their offense. This just inspects. I feel like there are some RPGs that give you an inspect thing, so you can see what the enemy's stats are, or their description, or both. I wish this game had better descriptions for the enemies. Like, I feel like in this game, it doesn't feel like there's much point to inspecting. It doesn't feel like any of the enemies have particularly interesting descriptions or interesting sort of stats or modifiers or gimmicks to them that the inspect makes any sense to have, which is unfortunate. So, like I said, I feel like the combat, in terms of complexity, isn't super interesting. It's okay, it's serviceable, but with the lack of variety and the poor pacing of the amount of enemies in each area, it feels a little bit, it's just a little bit poorly, I don't know if I want to say poorly done, because it's not necessarily bad. I don't think the combat's bad, and I don't think the way they do the combat is necessarily bad, but it's not as good as I would have hoped in a game that's supposed to be an RPG. I need to find an air hole or something. 1 second. Okay, so this is a different enemy. Hopefully I can show you their different attacks. This is basically what, oh God. That's basically what the difference in the QTEs is. The QTEs are all just a little bit different, but not different enough that it makes it feel interesting for different enemies. Let me try to get this guy. Whoops. Shoot. Now I'm doing badly. I don't actually think this is that hard if I'm focusing, like I would be if I wasn't recording. Shoot. Shoot. I actually don't think this is that hard. Why? Oh, that was my bad. I accidentally got confused because of the broccoli. Oh shoot, I wanted to show you this. So the way that you... Oh, I'm still reversed. That's the problem. So here's how the combat works. It sort of has that Undertale. So like I said, the battles actually aren't that hard. It sort of has that Undertale attack bar type thing where you're trying to hit it in the center. And in this game, if you hit in the center, you get to do the bar again. So normally you only get to do it once if you don't hit it perfectly in the center. But in this game, you try to do combo attacks. And that's also one of the things that I think makes combat pretty easy. Once you get far enough into the game that you're used to the speed of the attack bar, it's actually quite easy to get 2 or 3 hits on an enemy. And then if you buffed your attack once or twice, that's actually all it takes. It's actually not, most fights I think are not that difficult. And my inventory is just so full of a billion items that I don't need, because I almost never actually use them. I just want to get into another fight. I want to show you the bar again. So that's what happens if you miss it and don't get it in the center. Whoops, my bad. Shoot. Ah, crud. Oh, that's so rude. But yeah, that's basically all there is to the combat. You're basically just buffing or debuffing stats. You're trying to run away from the QTEs, or trying to run away from the bullet hells. You're doing the QTEs. Give me the broccoli. Reverse my controls. Okay, get me out of here. But other than that, I keep on doing this. One of the reasons I keep on missing these is because I ate the broccoli, so it reverses all my controls, even during the little QTE segments, which keeps on messing me up and causing me to miss. But yeah, for the most part, it feels like most enemies, their attack patterns are very similar to that. They're not all that interesting. And with the way the combat works, so unlike in Undertale, let me actually go back and show you again. Unlike in Undertale, let me try to specifically show you this. Whoops. Okay, let's get it wrong. Unlike in Undertale, you're stuck at the bottom of the screen. Like, you're not moving around the whole screen. So it feels like what ends up happening is they don't design they can't design like a huge range of different kinds of attack patterns. So most of the enemies are gonna be, they're dropping a thing at you from the top of the screen, and you're stuck at the bottom of the screen, moving left and right, and that's it. So it ends up making a lot of the fights feel samey, even with their unique gimmicks. Like I said, like you saw there, the jellyfish had its own unique gimmick of like shooting. I'm not gonna do this. The jellyfish had like its own unique gimmick of shooting the, oh goodness, okay. Shooting the lightning at you from the top of the screen. But it's still just shooting bullets from the top of the screen to the bottom of the screen. It ends up making all the fights feel stagnant and similar. So this is actually something I wanted to start talking about now that we've gotten past the combat. The story of the game. So the narrative of this game is that you are looking for your younger sister. You're playing as Theo. At the beginning of the game, you're just sort of playing, having a normal life, having fun with your sister, talking to your mom. And then as we get further and further into the game, the narrative sort of feels like ethereal and dreamlike. It sort of goes back and forth between things like going to sleep and waking up and entering dream sequences, going to strange worlds that you don't recognize, and having flashbacks to your old home. You get like visions of ghosts and lights, and you hear voices, and things like this happen, which is why I wanted to start getting into it, where you start seeing like static effects. Hopefully we get a little bit more. We might not. Okay, now that we're here, I actually need to find some oxygen. This seems really bad. I want to find a place to get some oxygen before we die. Whew, okay. But yeah, like you saw there with the static effect on the branch, there are various points in the game where you're sort of like, things are happening. That's so rude and evil and mean. Things are just sort of happening. Oh, here's a bullet hell without a QTE. Well, that's rude. Okay. Let me... This is a really bad place to be doing this in because the oxygen time limits. Let me just try to get past this. But things are always happening to you that are sort of confusing and dreamlike and ethereal and mysterious. So it's the sort of thing where what ends up happening is the... Oh God. There we go. So this is normally how good the QTEs go. That's my bad. That's normally how well the QTEs go. Let me... This really is a bad place to do this. Oh, good. Now we're out of oxygen land. Okay, so like I said, a lot of weird, mysterious things are happening and sort of go back and forth between dream worlds and stuff. And this game is called Dreamed Away. So I think the intended narrative experience is difficult to pin down because the main bulk of the gameplay sort of takes place in this weird world that you don't know anything about. You're just sort of going along with the flow of things, and it like you're just going around this world trying to find things, trying to get by. You don't really know what's happening or where you are, and that gets interspersed with these sort of flashbacks and visions and dream sequences. Like this is another like vision thing. This specifically, you get visions of this weird ball, and they like talk to you, and you don't know whose voice it is. So I think it's sort of difficult to discern what parts of this game are literally things that are happening in the story. Like, is Theo literally seeing this ball physically in the space? Oh, never mind. Actually, that's really funny. So that's actually a really funny way to sort of use that against you. So normally what it is, it's like this ghost ball whose voice that you're hearing. This is a really good way to subverse that, your expectations on that, because this is literally an anglerfish. But yeah, like I said, it's difficult to discern what's supposed to literally be happening in the world around him versus what's sort of metaphorical or a dream or a vision. But overall, I think that the flow of the game story is actually pretty good. My only real criticism, I think, that again, I'm trying like not to spoil things, so I can't give you specific information on very particular story beats, but I think my only real criticism is based on certain parts of dialogue and how the game is presenting its sort of dream sequences and metaphors. Oh, this seems really bad for me. Nice. But yeah, I've never seen that bullet pattern before. It does still feel very samey. You're just looking at a different part of the screen to try and do your things. But based on like the way it presents its story and the dialogue, as well as certain dream sequences, I almost feel as though the game may have played its hand a little bit early, like narratively. The story is supposed to be mysterious and you're supposed to not have any idea what's going on. Where are you? What's happening? What's a dream? What's real? Where's your sister? But I feel like I have an idea of what the narrative is about, and I've had that feeling for a really long time. Now, currently I'm like halfway, probably more than halfway through chapter 4. And from what I can find, it seems that there are about 6 chapters. According to the developer, the game is about 10 to 15 hours long. According to How Long to Beat, it's about 9.5 hours long. I'm like 5 to 6 hours into the game almost done chapter 4. So I'm expecting to be done in like under 10 hours. But like even with where I am, way earlier in the game, like in like the second area, I think, I felt like I had a decent grasp on where the story is going. And I don't think it's necessarily bad for the player to sort of have theories on where the story is going, but it feels like it hasn't gone, like the narrative hasn't gone anywhere interesting. Like the things that are happening in the game are cool. I like what's happening right now, for example, what they did with the dream ball and the anglerfish. I think that the things that are happening in the story are cool, but in terms of the narrative, I feel like it hasn't done anything interesting in a really long time, and I feel like I've had a good grasp on where it's going from near the beginning. And I haven't reached the end of the game, so who knows? I could be completely wrong. I'm just worried based on my experience. Like I said, this isn't... I'm only partway through the game. These have a look ats. They aren't like full reviews of the whole game. They're more first impressions. So obviously I'm not gonna have a good grasp on the entire narrative of the game, so I can't tell you if it's good or not. But where I am, it feels like the game has played its hand a bit too early. And as we get further into the story, it feels like it's gotten... It's gotten repetitive in terms of the delivery of things, like its themes and story beats, and it hasn't like broken the mold in terms of where I think it's going to go next. But again, I'm like, what would you say, 60-70% of the way through the game, so I could be entirely wrong. By the time we get to the end of the game, I could like completely flip my opinion around. But for now, it feels like, in terms of both the story pacing and the narrative and the combat of this game, the pacing of everything just generally feels a little bit mixed. Not necessarily bad, because I am really enjoying playing the game. But there are parts of it where it feels stagnant. There are parts of it where it feels like some parts of the game are dragging too long. Like earlier in this area, I had to go around and do tasks for people that weren't interesting. They were just kind of, hey, can you give this to this person and then come back and then give this to this person and then come back and give this to this person? And there wasn't a whole lot going with that, but there were other parts of the game where I felt things were really interesting and moving at a pretty brisk pace. So while I don't think the story and the narrative is necessarily bad, I feel like the pacing is a little bit of a mixed bag going into this game. But yeah, that's basically everything that I have to say about this game, just because anything else would probably be spoiling the actual story. And I think this is the type of game where it's more fun to go in not knowing anything about the story and learning as you go. This game is available on Steam, GOG, Xbox, and Nintendo Switch for $18.99 or your regional equivalent, and there's a free demo available on Steam and itch.io. My name has been Tokimaru. Thank you very much for watching. Leave a like if you liked the video. Leave a dislike if you didn't like the video. Go ahead, I won't be hurt. And I will see you all next time.